And as I've learned over the last couple of months more about Armature, it's very clear that their approach and their actual software product is very aligned to the work of accreditation. And that's in many ways the heart and soul of what they do. And so I think all of you will find that this software has some potential opportunities for us to streamline our work and to have it become more efficient and effective. I believe we're going to save some time for questions at the end, but I know Andrew and Rohan are going to go through some of the specifics about that in a second. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Armature's Chief Marketing Officer, Andrew Bryden.
Thank you, Bonnie, and thanks just in general to ICAISA. We're really enjoying sponsoring this organization, and we're very committed to the success of the organization and you all as well. I met some of you up at the dinner last Tuesday, where many of you were putting wagers on where my accent was from, and most of you got it wrong. I'm not from South Africa. I'm from a little island called the United Kingdom, but I've been here for about 20 years, and 20 years is actually how long Armature has been in business. Our business is built on supporting accreditors. 90% of our customers are in the accreditation, predominantly educational accreditation community, and we would love just to give you a tour of that software today. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end, so stock those up, and I'm going to hand you over to Rohan, who's going to take you through the software right now. So Rohan, you are on.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and thank you very much, Bonnie. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you very much for having us. I appreciate everyone taking the time to go through this demo this morning. What I'm going to do is, as Andrew mentioned, I'm going to just give you a very brief overview of the capabilities of our system. We've been working with accreditors for a long time. We've incorporated a lot of best practices that we've learned along the way. So hopefully you'll see that as we go through this. If there are and any questions, and I think Bonnie mentioned this, and Andrew as well, we'd like to leave time at the end of the demo session to handle any questions or to answer any questions that you might have that might come up as we're going through the demo itself. Probably about 15 to 20 minutes. The demo itself usually takes about 30 to 40 minutes or so. One of the key themes that you're going to hear me hit on a number of times throughout the presentation is really how configurable the system is. So one of the things we've learned working with accreditors is, you really like to be able to change your process, or you really like to be able to change your standards year over year. So we really wanted to empower you to make all of those changes without having to come back to us, for those types of changes. So everything that you're going to see today, I'd say about 95% of what we're going to go through is really configurable by you. So you can go in, there's user interface that you can go in, and you'll be able to make those changes as necessary. Excuse me. So I'm going to jump right into it. There are a couple of key areas that I want to hit today. First is going to be a little bit around how our dashboards work. Really just getting to the right information at the right time, hopefully streamlining your interaction with the system, what you need to accomplish in a day, as well as your staff. The second thing we're going to look at is our CRM, so looking at some data around how we capture data around the programs and institutions that you accredit. So how we capture that data, where it lives, how you can access it. The next thing we'll look at is self-studies, on-site assessments, so forms that we can actually build into the system that'll allow you to capture data around the accreditation process. We'll look at process management. We have a fully built workflow management system. And then finally, we'll look at a little bit of our reporting capabilities, as well as the setup and configuration of the system itself. So as I mentioned, where we're going to start here is on the dashboards. Here we're looking at a staff dashboard. We do have a portal for your accredited institutions and programs, so they will be able to access data. They'll have their own separate portal. The data will be obviously limited only to their institution or program. We also have portals for individuals, so could be board members or council members. It could be assessors, reviewers, people who may not necessarily need much more access into the system beyond just what they're assigned during the accreditation process. So we're going to start on the staff side, which is going to be a more holistic view of the system, and I will give you a flavor of what the other two views look like a little bit later in the demo. So here we're looking at a staff dashboard. On the left here, you'll see tasks that have been assigned to me specifically. So this is my personal dashboard. These are the things that I'm either responsible for or I am a part of in terms of being part of maybe a review team, being assigned a task in a process. We also have a concept of issues or nonconformances, and I'll touch on that a little bit later when we get to our forms, our self-studies, our on-site assessments. I'll touch a little bit on what issues and nonconformances are. But for now, on the left, you'll see, again, tasks and things that I'm responsible for. On the right, these are the assessments or self-studies. You'll see there's some self-studies here. That could be on-site assessments that I'm responsible for. So I can click on these. I can go directly to it, directly from this dashboard. Now, one of the other types of dashboards that we have beyond just the individual dashboard is basically a roll-up of data. So you can ignore the headers that we've used here, the business units we've used here. What I really want you to see is our ability to actually roll up data across your organization. We can do this by region. We can do this by however you break down how you manage. It could be by cohort, for example. However you break down your accreditation program and how you manage your organizations and institutions. That's really what we want to show as kind of a roll-up of data. So here we're looking at all of the assessments that are currently outstanding. We can look at it by specific type of assessment if you'd like. We can look at it by scores. So there's a number of ways you can break this data down and help you visualize, all the data in your system. So if you're doing any sort of reporting, you'll be able to see sort of an overview of what's going on within the system itself. We'll have an issue summary. So these are potential nonconformances. We can tie these actually back to individual standards, which will allow you to go back and say, okay, are there specific standards that many of our institutions and programs are not necessarily meeting or having challenges with? Maybe we need to clarify the standard itself. Maybe we need to provide some educational resources to those accredited institutions and programs. There's a number of different, hopefully, things that you can take away and information that you can glean from having this sort of roll-up data. Let's switch back here to the dashboard. So next, I'm going to move on to our CRM. So this is where we're going to manage data around the organizations you accredit or the institutions or programs, along with the individuals who are involved in the accreditation process as well. I'm going to touch very briefly on how you can track data around individuals. We do allow for tracking training certifications at an individual level if that's something of interest to you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it for this particular demo. So if there are questions about it, I'm happy to answer them towards the end of the call. But for now, I'm going to focus really more on the institutions and programs themselves and the types of data that we would capture. So what I did was I clicked on Armature Solutions Corporation, and what we're looking at here is just a very basic profile sort of dashboard where you can see any active applications that they currently have, any certifications or accreditation decisions that have been made, along with some organization data. So at the bottom right here, you'll see a tab or a widget called Organization Data. And this is where you can actually add your own data points. You are not limited to the types of data that we capture, like addresses and phone numbers and email addresses and all of those things. You can actually add your own individualized data points. So every one of your dashboards or your profiles can look very different from each other, depending upon the type of data that you capture as part of your accreditation programs. I'm going to skip on profile because it's really just kind of a basic overview of the organization itself. And I'm going to skip the contacts here. So here we have a list of contacts that are associated with the organization or institution. On the right, you'll see a couple of interesting points. So you'll be able to see what their role is. We have specific types of contacts. They could be a billing contact or a main contact or whatever the case might be. There will always be one primary contact, so that'll typically be the person that you interact with the most. That could be a program director, that could be the institution director. And then just to the right of that, you'll see a column here called Trusted. So this is actually where you'll be able to assign access to these individuals so that they can enter the portal from the organization or institution's perspective. So that's where this trusted column, if you give them trusted access, they will be provided a link, and they will be able to access the portal and see information related to this particular institution or program. You can allow for administrators at that organization to add their own individuals, or if they have members of their team that they want to add, you do have the option of allowing for that. You are not forced into it, so there's a lot of security controls we can put in place to make sure that only you are providing access, only you're, so if you want them to funnel access requests through you, but if that's unwieldy, or you just have too many programs that you're accrediting, you don't want to manage that yourself, you can assign a primary contact who can then add individuals if you so choose. I'm going to come back to what an individual's profile looks like, and I'll just touch on that very briefly. But first, I want to go through the rest of the tabs on the top here, or at least the ones that I think that might be of interest. So the next one is structure. Structure is really designed for if you have an institution maybe that has multiple programs under it that you might be working with. It could also be sites, it could be departments. There's any number of ways that you can break up the structure, but really this is to give you kind of a visual hierarchy of where this particular organization fits within a broader hierarchy. The next thing I'll touch on is processes. So processes are really our workflow management system, and I'm gonna go ahead and click on one of these in just a second. But before I do that, really what we want to show you is, for example, I have an example accreditation process that I'm gonna touch on quickly. This will hopefully give you an overview of how we run through the accreditation process step by step. You are not limited to just an accreditation process. You can actually build in any sort of workflow that you'd like within the system. It's fairly robust, so you can build in microprocesses, approval processes, things like that, or you can have a more, just a step-by-step accreditation process and have everything in one place. And I'll just show you really quickly what I'm talking about here and click on this. So this is a generic accreditation process. Your process may have more or less steps. You will have full control over how you group these steps together, what stages appear here. You'll have full control over everything that you see. This is just a generic process that I like to show because I think it touches on a lot of what most accreditors see going through the accreditation process itself. So it could be grant user access, it could be schedule the application, fill out the application, etc. You can assign those to individual people. You can show whether it's in progress or completed, due dates, etc. And here you'll also be able to, you'll see the activity that this person is responsible for, or I might be responsible for. You can add ad hoc tasks as well. So if this is a good framework for you, but you know that there are some individual tasks that need to be addressed, you can actually add ad hoc tasks. So here I can create a new task name, I can show a description or some instructions, assign it to an individual, show the assignment date, due date, etc. And by the way, these due dates, these will show up in the individual's dashboard who it's assigned to. So you will be able to see on your dashboard if you're assigned to something very specific or you're responsible for a specific type of task. We can send emails from our system as well. So if anyone responds to those emails, that will get captured here in addition. If a particular task requires a pre-created email, for example, you can actually pre-write these emails so that all you have to do is merge data into it and then send it out directly from the system. So you don't necessarily have to go in and write an email from scratch. If you have a template email that you'd like to use, you're welcome to use that instead of, and that's why it says no email exists on this activity. There are ways to pre-create those emails as part of a task. We do have a fully built document management system, which I will touch on a little bit later, but you do have the ability to associate documents, basically upload or associate documents with this particular task. And then finally, we have the ability to add comments. Comments can be used for collaboration purposes. So you can certainly, add comments, have people respond to those comments, et cetera. So this gives you hopefully an in-house or an in-application collaboration tool, as opposed to trying to handle everything via email or whatever the case may be. A couple other things I want to point out on the process side. So you do have, this is a process, this is a more functional process view. We also have a more read-only process view. And again, these milestones are completely configurable by you. You can have as many or as few as you'd like. Here we're showing how much progress basically you made through the accreditation process. So typically this is a view that your accredited institutions and programs or candidate institutions and programs would see as they're going through the process, so that they can just see generally where they are, how much have they been accomplished, when did they accomplish specific tasks or specific milestones along the way. We have another view here called artifacts, and this is interesting because this will show you any of the documents, any of the assessments, self-studies, if they have access, that have been basically have been either assigned or completed as part of this accreditation process. And finally, we have an activity view. So if you ever want to go back and see what happened and when throughout the accreditation process, you'll be able to see that. So who accomplished, who changed due dates, who assigned specific stages, who completed specific stages, when they completed those. So you'll always have kind of an audit history, and you can go back and see that the full history of this particular process. Okay, I'm going to head back to the CRM, back to the organization's view or the profile view. So we were on processes, and by the way, we'll list all of the processes here. On the right, you'll be able to see if there are any that are coming due or that are maybe overdue. That's what this little red dot denotes. On the right, you'll also see progress through the process as well. So any processes that this particular organization is going through or this particular program is going through, you'll be able to see how much progress has been made so far, and if they're going through multiple processes as well. So next, we're going to look at instruments. And actually, I'm gonna come back to, after we go through the rest of this CRM, I'll come back to instruments and do a deeper dive into it. But here I just want to show you, so these are where self-studies will appear, on-site visits will appear, reviews as well. So we're housing all of that under the instruments tab. The institution or the program will not necessarily be able to see it. They'll obviously be able to access it if it's a self-study. If it's an on-site visit report, they will not have access to it. They will not be able to see it. So we have very strict controls in place to make sure that the institution or program is not necessarily seeing data that they should not be seeing. Only the individuals who are responsible for for completing it will have access to it at the right time. We do have a full team building module as well. I'll show you what that looks like. But here you can at least see kind of an overview of when was it started, when is it due, has it been submitted yet, whatever the status is. So is it in progress or submitted or not started, and any progress that's been made against each individual instrument. But I will come back and show you what this looks like in a little bit more detail in just a few minutes. Decisions is basically where we're capturing, is this organization accredited? How long are they accredited for? So we can certainly see some additional information listed here. We have compliance, we have findings here that have been basically captured as part of the decision process, or as part of either a review of the self-study or your on-site visit or whatever the final report is. We can capture some information around those. Any documents that have been uploaded as part of this decision, and how long they're accredited for. We do have notifications when accreditation is coming due, and this will appear, so at least the term of accreditation, the decision date, some of this information will be available to the program or institution so that they can log in and see, am I accredited and how long am I accredited for? I mentioned that we have a fully built document management system. There are two aspects to this document management system, at least as it relates to programs and institutions. On the one hand, we have a library of documents that we will capture, maybe as part of the accreditation process, or just documents that we want to capture along the way. We also have the ability to share documents with programs and institutions as well. So, for example, if you have standards is probably not the right example, because we have a fully built standards management tool within this, but it could be updates that have happened. So if you have a document that you want to share with all of your institutions, you can easily do that using our document management system, and you'll be able to see whatever documents you have shared under the shared tab. Next, we're going to look at very briefly is issues, and this is very closely related to instruments. So as site visits are happening or reviews are happening, and you're identifying specific standards that are maybe not being met to the right degree in order for the institution or program to be accredited, we create something called issues. Now, this will hopefully help you with your ongoing monitoring of, so your initial accreditation process where you're identifying potential issues, and along with your ongoing monitoring that you're doing, or your continuous monitoring that you're doing over a period of time through the period that they're accredited for, so you can keep track of any of the issues that have come up, any of the standards that have maybe not been met along the way. So you can do more targeted visits, site visits, more targeted assessments, things like that, to hopefully cut down on trying to go through the whole, all of your standards every year or every other year or whatever your process calls for. Hopefully we can give you the ability to do a far more targeted either questionnaire or self-study or whatever it might be, cutting down on the amount of time that's needed for continuous monitoring. I'm not going to get into requests and emails, but we do have the ability to capture inquiries or complaints if you have a customer service team, or if your accreditation team is responsible for answering questions. We do have an inbuilt tool for that, and as well as capturing any emails that have gone out as part of the accreditation process. You can keep track of a lot of those communications here under the emails tab. So the next thing I'm going to look at, and I mentioned this before, is instruments. So I'm going to navigate to our instruments tab here. Now, instruments covers a wide range of data collection forms. In this case, we're going to be looking at a self-study, but we do have the ability to look at to manage site visit reports as well. And I'll show you what our team building tool looks like. Really, what I want to do is give you just a flavor for what it maybe a self-study would look like, and then you can extrapolate that over to what a site visit report, which will look very similar, but maybe just have ratings associated with it, along with what a review might look like as well. So here we have who the assessment is assigned to currently, open and close dates, status, etc. If there's any internal coordinators who are responsible, so any of your staff who might be responsible for assisting this particular program or university or school. On the right, you'll see who this particular assessment is assigned to. These can be assigned, in the case of self-studies, they typically get assigned to the organization contacts. So anybody who is a trusted contact for this university who has portal access, they'll be able to access it through their portal and see the screen and be able to access the actual assessment itself. On the bottom left, we'll see an overview of all the different sections that we've created as part of the self-study. And I'll show you, I'm going to click into it here in just a second. We can also see an overview of any documents that have been uploaded so far. So if you've already sort of started the assessment or started the site visit, whatever it might be, we'll be able to see any documents that have been uploaded so far. And on the bottom right, we'll see, currently we're doing some scoring for this particular assessment. So we can assign scores to particular ratings. And I'll show you what I mean here in just a second. But if for example, a program or institution meets a particular standard, and maybe that's compliant for you, that could be 1 point or 2 points. If they're partially compliant, maybe that's, half a point or something like that. And if they're not compliant, it could be 0. So this could be a way, if you don't currently have a scoring, a way of scoring today, you could potentially incorporate that in the future. And scoring allows you to do some really interesting reporting on the other side of that, to be able to see on a section by section or standard by standard basis, along with at an assessment level, how are all of your institutions and programs doing, and be able to see kind of a roll-up of that sort of data. But this is just a visual representation of that scoring that we're looking at here on the right. So you'll be able to see what the potential score is versus what the actual score was. I'm going to click in standard 1 here, so just to give you a flavor of what we're looking at. And I'll come back to what these previous sections look like in just a second. So here we have our standards. You'll see that there are a number of standards that I've built in. We do have some ratings here as well. So I can change the ratings as long as I have access and I'm able to have the right permissions, excuse me. If I'd like, for example, for standard 1 or standard 1A, I do have the ability to upload documents. I have the ability to add comments. Pardon me, just 1 second, actually. I think I need to open this back up. So the close date is passed, which basically means that this is read-only from here on out. So what I'm doing, because I'm an administrator, I'm changing the due date to March 31st, and that will allow me to access this, this particular assessment. So now when I click back in, you'll be able to see that I can now change my ratings. So in this case, we're using a rating of met, not applicable. You can use whatever rating system you want. So that's completely configurable by you. You can decide whatever the nomenclature that you use is. That's definitely configurable. You can change those. So don't worry about what you're seeing on the screen currently. That can be changed. So what I did was I clicked on the standard here. You'll see that there's a box for findings. So if I want to add some narrative, I can certainly do that. This is full HTML text, so you can, make changes. You can copy and paste it from Word if you'd like, and it will preserve the formatting. But here on the right, you'll see my navigation pane. Under here is where I'll be able to add documents. So if I want to, say, upload a particular document, I can do that. I'm going to just upload a document quickly here. Once I've uploaded the document, you'll see I'm going to be given the option to actually add some remarks. So in this case, I'm going to say see pages 5 through 10. And what that's going to allow me to do is I can add as many comments as I want about this document. Now that I've uploaded it, I can actually go to the next standard and simply reference that same document by selecting an existing document. So I can basically upload a document once and reference it multiple times to multiple standards, each with its own unique comments associated with it, hopefully making it a little bit easier for your reviewers, your on-site visitors, whoever is actually looking at, say, self-study, to quickly get to the information that's being provided. I do have the ability to add comments here as well. So in the case of a self-study or in the case of a site visit, it can be used for collaboration purposes. And to that end, we also have the ability to add flags. So if I click on the standard, you'll see that I have flags available. Now the colors of the flags and the text associated with the flags are configurable. So don't worry if this nomenclature doesn't work for you. But in this case, if I'm flagging something for follow-up, I can go ahead and apply that flag. That flag will appear here. And when I navigate back to this assessment, maybe at a later point, or someone else from my team navigates to this particular assessment, they can actually filter by specific flags. They can also filter by rating. So if I only want to see the standards that have not been met, for example, I can go ahead and filter by specific ratings as well. So that's a little bit of just ease of use, ease of access. Make sure you get to the right information at the right time. Here on the right, you'll also see our overall progress. So this is very similar to the view we looked at earlier, but you can see how much progress has been made. If scoring is available to me personally, if I've been given permission to see what sort of score has been assessed against this particular self-study or site visit, I'll be able to see that here as well. We do offer offline capabilities. So for your site visitors who are going to institutions who maybe don't have strong Wi-Fi access or strong internet connections, we do offer offline functionality. So everything that you see here can be taken offline, filled out, and then essentially synced back to the database once you get back online. And it's very, very simple. Once you've taken it offline, there's an option, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a sec. You'll be prompted to sync the data back. So it's very, very easy to use. There's not a lot of training, required for it. Finally, we have issues, and I am going to talk a little bit about what nonconformances look like. So, so as I mentioned before, for a particular standard, if it's not being met, for example, right? So I'm going to mark this as not met. I might want to create an issue, and this is typically something that an on-site visitor would do or a reviewer would do post self-study. So I'm going to create an issue here, and this will give me the option to capture some information. So where I say nonconformance, this can also be recommendations. These can be whatever it might be, right? A recommended operating procedure, whatever it might be. You can use whatever nomenclature you want. In this case, these are just the ones that we built into the system as a demo. I can also click on the severity level. So for example, if you have specific standards that need to be met as part of your accreditation program, and there's no question that it has to be met 100%, you can mark those as critical. So if a particular program or institution is not meeting that standard for whatever reason, you can mark that as a critical nonconformance or critical issue that needs to be addressed before the accreditation process can be completed. We can assign this to individuals, so you can assign this to an individual at the organization. It could be the primary contact at the organization who's basically responsible for completing this and making sure that this is addressed from their end. And we can change the status to in progress, and obviously we'll be able to have the statement of issue. Why is this particular standard not being met? You will, once you've created an issue, you will have the ability to upload documents against the issue. So you certainly can have evidence if you want to show the document itself as to why they're not, if there's a document that's not potentially meeting a particular standard, or if you have a picture or something along those lines while you're on site that shows why they're not in compliance, you can add that evidence against this as well. And then you'll see there's a space for resolution, and if you do any sort of root cause analysis, you can allow for that as well here. So that's everything I think I wanted to show you around data collection instruments. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this. I have a couple more, just a couple more aspects of this that I want to show you from a staff standpoint. So you do have the ability to export this into HTML or PDF. You can also print this. One of the things we can do is add headers. It's a fairly common thing that we do for our customers, is add, say, your letterhead and things like that to these exports. So we can make this very easy to export your reports, and it will show how much progress has been made, which standards have been met and not met, any documents associated, all of that will show up in this report. I mentioned take offline, so you can take the assessment offline. There's the option here. And one of the interesting things is we can also import data from previous assessments. So if, for example, you do an annual report, that annual report can be populated or pre-populated from last year's data or previous year's data. So you don't necessarily have to have your institutions fill out a whole assessment all over again. You can at least give them a starting point or allow them to have a starting point, from the beginning. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to show about instruments. We touched very briefly on issues and non-conformances. And so one of the things I'd like to show you as well is our reporting capabilities. So we do have a number of standard reports in the system, and you'll see there's a number that we can go through here. I won't touch on all of them, but you'll see, if we want to see, just show me all of the active reviews in the system, just show me all of the applications, any number of ways of cutting data, but these are all standard reports that we ship with. So you can always go in and see self-assessment response report, et cetera. You can run these reports at any time. You are not limited to, to when you can run these. These can be set up however you'd like. And you'll see you'll also have the ability to add or change columns, and it will export into I want to say CSV file. It's either CSV or Excel file, so that you can manipulate the data however you'd like. But yes, it will export into a CSV or an Excel. We do actually have some additional reporting capabilities where we can visualize data within the system. So here we're actually looking at issues. You'll remember I was talking about non-conformances, and this will give you kind of an overview of issue trends over a period of time. Have those non-conformances been resolved over a period of time? How many are open? What the average duration for resolution is? Longest outstanding items, et cetera. So you can actually click onto the actual longest outstanding item to make sure that it's being addressed. You can see who it's assigned to, et cetera. But we wanted to give you just like I said, a sort of a trend, be able to show you visually how these issues are actually being addressed over a period of time. We are not necessarily limited to visualizing only issues. That's just the one that we show. But if you do want to add some additional reporting and visualizations, we would work with you to understand what those would need to look like, and we'd work with you to make sure that they get into the system. Finally, I want to take a quick look at the portal from the organization and program standpoint before I get into the setup and configuration. I have about 5 to 6 more minutes that I'd like to go through just a few more aspects of the system, and then I'll come back and start our Q&A session. So I'm going to go ahead and change my persona. Because I'm an administrator, I do have the ability to impersonate other types of roles within the system. So in this case, my items is really what a reviewer or an assessor who really doesn't have much more need or access into the system, they would have their own sort of portal. But here I have organization rep, and this is where I'll be able to access on behalf of an organization. So in this case, Armature Solutions Corporation. if they're an accredited program or institution, this is basically what they would see or what a representative would see when they log in. So we have our active applications here on the right. This will be a very similar view to what we looked at from the staff side, but this is data that's only related to this program or institution. On the left, you'll see any certifications that I currently hold, my accreditation status, and on the bottom right, you'll see issues that need to be resolved, what the latest resolution date or the one that's most overdue will show here, along with any processes that I'm currently going through. So this could be an accreditation process or a micro process, an approval process, something along those lines, and then scheduled items. So these are the assessments that have been assigned to this particular organization. So as a representative, I can have a quick snapshot for all the things that I might be responsible for on behalf of this organization. If you're given the ability, so if you would like to have the institutions manage their own profile data, you can allow for that here. Again, you can have individuals be able to be added. So if I'm an administrator for this particular program or institution, I can add additional individuals to my list of contacts. And then basically everything else across the top here is essentially very similar to what the staff would see. It's a very similar view. The only difference is that it's related specifically to this organization. The one area I wanted to show you that is very different for the program is the list of issues. So as non-conformances are being generated as part of a review or self-study, excuse me, as part of a review or site visit, those will appear here, and I'll be able to actually provide resolution directly into this particular non-conformance, or I can click on the non-conformance and add some additional evidence of how we potentially address this particular issue. You'll see which standard it's related to, any root cause information, whatever can be added here as well. Okay, I'm going to just navigate quickly back to the staff view and just show you very quickly all the things that you have the ability to configure. So we have the ability to manage standards here. We have the ability to manage instruments, processes, notifications. Here we can actually change the text related to notifications. So if there's a notification that says, hey, your assessment is coming due in 7 days, if you would like to add additional text to that, you can do that. We can add additional notifications in here as well. You can change all of the information around what your accreditation decisions say, the text associated with it. All of those can be changed. But to give you a sense also for what type of permissions can be managed within the system, and again, you have full control over this. We do provide training around how to manage additional security roles, but you'll see that almost every aspect of the system, you can control who has access, when they have access, if they can see it as read-only, or if they can actually just not see it at all. Everything has its own set of permissions within the system. So suffice it to say, it's a very configurable system. We want to empower you as much as possible. I think I'm going to stop. I think I've given you hopefully a good overview of kind of the breadth of our capabilities. We can certainly spend a lot more time getting into a lot more depth, but I'm going to go ahead and stop here and just leave some time for a Q&A.
Thank you, Rohan. That was a great snapshot and overview of all of the features of the accreditation software. Let's go ahead and open it up to questions. Folks can go ahead and pose questions via their microphone, or if chat is a feature as well, folks can use that.
So I have a question real quick. Can we get a demo of this to play with ourselves?
So yes, we do offer the ability to have a sandbox to be able to use it yourself. Typically, if we're going to do that, I would recommend maybe an hour or two of dedicated training. What we want to be careful of is just handing over a system without giving you any context or anything like that. And if there are specific use cases, I can help set those up for you. But absolutely, if you're interested in the sandbox, we can certainly discuss that a little bit further after this call. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Is there? How do I do the turn on the chat for this for GoToMeeting so I can put in some questions?
There is a actually I don't really know the other view, the participant view. I apologize, but there's usually a chat bubble that you can use.
Yeah, it looks like a little.
It's up at the top. It's up at the top, not on the
Top
bottom.
right.
Like.
And Rohan, we've got a question through the chat, which is how does this module integrate with current database systems?
Yep, that's a great question. So we everything in our system is API driven. So we use APIs even internally in our system. Depending upon the system that we want to integrate with, whatever the database might be. If they have APIs, that's our preference. If not, we can look at doing a direct database integration, although that's our least favorite method. So it just depends on the system itself. We would need to understand how the database is structured, if there are APIs available. So if there's more specificity, you know, I can give you a little bit clearer answer. If it's, for example, an association management system, we have extensive experience integrating with those. So we can talk a little bit more about that. So if you can provide some more information, I'm happy to elaborate more on that.
Can I tag along with Betty's question about the integration? Do you have experience? We use Salesforce for our all our CRM basically. Do you integrate with that? Do you have any experience?
Yes,
integrating?
We do. We have integrated with Salesforce in the past, and we do have quite a bit of experience. They have very open APIs, so you know, that's typically not an issue. We would also need to look at sort of the volume of data. If there are a lot of custom data points that you're capturing, we could give you probably a clearer picture of what that would look like and how complex it would be. But in general, we've done Salesforce integrations in the past, and it's been very, very successful. So no issue on that front.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like there's a few more questions in chat. About 70% of our accreditations are joint with other agencies. If the other agency also uses Armature, is there a way of sharing, especially for tracking? Yes, actually, that's a great question. We do have the ability to share some data. We probably need to understand who the organization is, you know, and if they're already using Armature is one potential path, and then that would be basically integrating our systems together, which shouldn't be an issue. If they don't currently use it and you'd like to start from scratch, that's probably the easiest, where you could share data. We have tenancies available within our system, so you can operate as multiple tenants, but still share some data. There's a number of different ways we can cut it. It can also be by permission. So if you know, one agency has one set of permissions and another agency has another set of permissions, there's a number of ways we can handle that. But the short answer to that question is yes. That's probably an ideal situation, quite honestly.
How is the
typical
determined? I'm sorry, how is the cost of your service determined?
We typically look at the number of users in the system. So we have two different user licenses. One is it's just an internal license. That would be staff. So the number of staff that would be interacting in the system. Those are typically a little bit more expensive, you know, than an external license. So anyone who has limited access, it's a much reduced cost because their interaction with the system is fairly limited. So we would just estimate the number of users, number of staff users, and then number of external users. That could be from your accredited institutions and programs. It could be reviewers. It could be council members, whoever it might be, but typically it's by user count. Once we've discussed the number of users, if you do end up adding users and things like that during the course of your contract, we will not charge you anything additional. So this is typically used as an estimate. So we'll just, if you tell me the number of programs that you work with and number of staff that you have, we can usually estimate the number of users in the system. And that would be, you know, we're not going to limit the number of users that you add or anything like that. What is the typical implementation timeline? So, so typically for most of our customers who don't have a lot of complexity in terms of their process, so a standard accreditation process, you know, some basic self-studies or on-site visit forms, I would say it's usually about 4 to 6 weeks, and typically about 100 hours or so of work. That's usually work that we'll help you with. So that's 100 hours on our end of helping you set up the system itself, users in the system. That includes training. That includes setting up the assessments themselves, the processes, all of those things. But typically it takes about 4 to 6 weeks for a standard implementation. If you have integration, data migration, or customization needs, typically that will extend further beyond that. We would have to estimate based on what your specific requirements are, but 4 to 6 weeks is our typical timeline.
And
we have 4 separate parties. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
Are those, so for the training for users, can that be done via webinar? Is that done remotely?
Yeah, typically we do most of our training remotely. We certainly can do on-site training. So one of the options we have is if you have like an annual conference or something along those lines, we can certainly attend and do some on-site training as well. But for the most part, most of our training is done remotely. We do have training resources available like user guides. We have a few videos here and there. We are trying to add to that library. So there are a number of different options that you might have before we even get to doing webinars and things like that. But that is our preference, is to do it remote wherever possible.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So another question here, we have 4 separate parties that need access to the information. Can permissions isolate different groups, i.e. schools, visiting committee, PAIS, and Commission for Accreditation? Yep, so that's a great question. Permissions are typically used to do exactly that, to segregate permissions, make sure that each individual group has its own specific sets of information. So as you can actually probably see on the screen here, we already have a couple of those pre-configured. If you can give us a sense for what type of data each individual group needs to have access to, we can help you configure those, or we'll give you the tools to configure them yourselves. It's totally up to you, but we can certainly, that's really what the permissions are designed to be able to do, and the configurable permissions are designed to do to make sure that we isolate access for each individual group. Another question here is, does this interface with Google and Dropbox? It certainly can. So I assume you mean from a document management standpoint. If you have your documents in Google Drive or Dropbox, the answer is yes. We can integrate with those solutions. If you'd like to migrate the data, so just have everything live in Armature rather than having two separate systems, that's an option as well. So we can discuss in a little bit more detail what that process might actually look like, and if there's any cost associated with it. Typically, integrations and data migration, there is some cost associated. Data migration tends to be a little bit less expensive because we're just moving data from one system to ours. Integration tends to be a little bit more expensive. How expensive it is really depends on, is there an API that exists? For example, Salesforce is usually fairly light because the APIs are already there. So we can discuss in a little bit more detail the answer to that question, but the short answer is yes, we certainly can interface with Google and Dropbox. Next question here is, some associations already have, some associations already have accreditation portals for the self-study and visiting committee report. Can this supplement an existing portal? That's a good question. Without a little bit more information, I think it might be hard to answer that question. It depends on what those portals are currently handling, how they're currently doing it, what the system is. Again, it would go back to the integration that I've been talking about. If there's an API, or there's a database on the back end that you're capturing that data and it has APIs associated with it, we could certainly supplement it. But again, it would be essentially an integration. So I would say for now, the short answer is, can we accommodate that? Yes. Would it be cost effective? I think we'd have to look into that to answer that question specifically, but certainly the raw capability is there. Similar to the above question about Google and Dropbox, can Armature integrate with an existing document management system in lieu of using the built-in system? Absolutely. So we do have experience working with a number of different document management systems, whether you use SharePoint or there's a ton out there. I can certainly provide a list, but yeah, that's not a problem at all. Would an existing accreditation portal add any efficiencies to the creation and implementation of a portal through Armature? Yeah, so this is similar, I think, to the previous question. It depends on what the existing accreditation portal is designed for, what type of data you're capturing within that portal. So I don't think I could give you a clear answer on that right now. But I would say if we could get into a little bit more detail around those, I could give you a clearer picture, a clearer answer, whether Armature would be a good supplement, whether it's something that you should potentially look at replacing. You know, I just, without more information, it's very hard for me to say, because I just don't understand. I don't know how much data you're capturing currently, what that data looks like, et cetera. I'd like to say yes, that we can create some more efficiencies, but again, without more information, I don't think I could say accurately right now. If we use Armature for document tracking, is there backup built in? Have you had interruptions in the system availability? No. So we run everything through AWS. That is our infrastructure provider. We have not had any service interruptions. Everything is backed up. Everything is redundant. Everything from power supply on the back end, and this is from a data center standpoint, all the way to backups of the data itself. We take snapshots, I believe, every day, possibly multiple times a day. I can look into what our actual recovery service time looks like. But yes, there is redundancy built in, and we do back up all of your data on a regular basis. Is Armature being used by any independent schools at this time? So we typically work with the accreditation organizations rather than the schools themselves. So the question would be, are we working with any independent school accreditors at the moment? Off the top of my head, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't think so.
We are. I'm going to correct you.
Oh, by all means, please.
You said correct me if I'm wrong, so I'm going to correct you. Yeah, we do. We actually have a customer right now that we're working with who accredits Lutheran schools around the country and overseas. So that's just an example of one of those types of customers. Yeah.
Yep. Oh no, that's perfect. I appreciate that. I mean, as Andrew mentioned earlier in the call, also we do, I would say about 70%, 60 to 70% of our customer base are education accreditors. So there are many universities and colleges that are using our system, but through the accreditor, not directly with us. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that question goes to in looking at your demonstration, which was very well done. That for most of for the schools that I'm involved with, you know, it has lots of features that we probably would not use. It's a very big system, and so for us, simpler is going to be better. And that kind of goes back to the question that was asked about pricing. So if we accredit 50 schools and we have 2 staff members that work with those, you had suggested there was a pricing system based upon staff members and external constituents. So can we get closer to some understanding of the range of prices we're looking at? So 50 schools, that means 5 accreditation visiting teams a year, perhaps. What can we get closer to have an understanding about what we're talking about in price?
Yeah. So and one of the things that you know, in terms of our standard pricing model, one of the things that we wanted to be able to offer is a more because we're working with ICAISA generally, is to offer, you know, sort of an alternative pricing model, or, you know, provide some benefit. So we're kind of still working through what that's going to look like. But what I'll do is, after this call, Andrew and I know have some time scheduled later today that we can talk about this. If it's okay with you, I'd like to put something a little bit more formal in a document and send that out to you guys, maybe within the next day or 2 or early next week. That will have a little bit more formal pricing. That will give you a full range, because, you know, we do have a standard pricing model, but we'd like to give you some additional benefits there. So once we've established what that looks like, I'm happy to provide that, you know, put it in writing and send it over to you guys so you can review it.
Thank you. That'd be very helpful.
No problem.
Yeah.
I was just wondering about something you showed us about how you can assign tasks and issues to people. I was wondering, is it also possible to organize people in like teams and then assign a task or an issue to a team as a whole? So say, I don't know, the curriculum team needs to look at a certain issue, and then there could be 4 people in that team.
Yeah, so certainly there are, yep, the ability to assign tasks to individuals and to teams as well. It depends on there are some aspects of the system where you can assign teams. There are some aspects of the system where you are not able to. So it just depends on specific areas of the system. In terms of instruments or reviews or things like that, you can certainly assign teams to reviewing specific types of, so for example, reviewing self-study, reviewing a site visit report, being a part of a site visit, all of those can be assigned teams.
Okay.
There's another question here in the chat. The graphs for issues that you showed, was that showing issues across multiple orgs? And if so, can the graphs be segmented by single organizations? Great question. That is showing, so that particular view, and I'm gonna just navigate back to that. This is showing across all organizations. So this is kind of a roll-up view. Can we do it at an individual, at single organizations? Yes. Currently, it's not a visualization the way we're looking at it here. It's not a graph. But if we actually navigate to one of these individual organizations, you can see all of the issues that have been assigned to this organization. So it's more of a functional view. If we wanted to potentially visualize this for specific organizations or for maybe groups of organizations, we can certainly look at doing that, but that is not available out of the box. So this would be your standard view. We can certainly add additional views as necessary. Looks like we're running up right against time here. I have, if we want to take one more question, I'm certainly happy to answer it. But I know we have a hard stop here at 11. What I'm happy to, if you'd like to send any additional questions that you might have to Bonnie, I'm happy to respond to those, make sure that I get responses within the next day or two. So please don't feel like, if you haven't had a chance to ask a question that you might have, happy to address them after this call.
That's great. And Rohan, if folks want to pursue further conversations with you, is there a way for them to contact you directly, or what's the best way for them to connect directly?
Absolutely, yeah. So what I'll do is, Bonnie, if it's okay, I'll just, I'm gonna type up an email after this. I'll have my contact information and everything in there. And if we can distribute that to everybody, that'd be great. Or if you want to give me the list, and I can reach out to everyone individually, I can do that as well. However you'd like to handle that, but I'll make sure that one way or another, I get my contact information out to everybody via email.
That sounds great. Excellent. And I just want to close us out here. Thank you all for carving out a little bit of time to join us today. And an especially deep thank you to Armature, Rohan, and Andrew. We, ICAISA, are incredibly grateful for your sponsorship and your support of ICAISA. And this has been a great opportunity to really get a sense of the work that you guys are doing. And I'm sure that folks will be interested in following up with you. And as you mentioned, Rohan, in the next few days, Rohan and I will connect, and we'll make sure that we get a chance to send out a little more details around what a potential pricing product would look like, and we'll go from there. So thank you all. I really appreciate you giving us this time, and thank you, Rohan and Andrew.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present. It's a pleasure meeting everybody, and we'll look forward to being in touch and continuing the conversation.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thanks.